In this video, we are going to continue our work on solving equations by looking at absolute value equations. As we get started with this, it would be important to know actually what is the absolute value? What does it do? So absolute value is a measurement. It measures a number's distance away from zero. So if you look at the number 3 on my number line right here to the right of 0, you can see that it is 3 units away from 0. And on the left-hand side, if I look at -3, I can see that it is also 3 units away from 0. So it doesn't really matter if your 3 is on the left or the right. It doesn't matter the direction that your 3 goes. What matters is the distance that it goes. And since absolute value measures distance, it's always a positive answer. So what does absolute value look like? Well, there's a couple of different ways that you might see this on your computer, on your calculator, in a test, on a test book, on a anything you might see for this class. So you could see it like this with those two bars. Those straight bars imply absolute value. So that's the absolute value of 3, which we just said it measures the distance. And we looked at on the other page that the absolute value of 3 is equal to 3. 3 is 3 units away from 0. If I put that negative in there, well, -3 is also 3 units away from 0. So those bars are telling me I'm measuring the distance, and it is also +3. The problem is not complete if it still has an absolute value in it. Absolute value is asking a question. How far away from 0 is this number? And until you answer that question, until you get rid of the absolute value bars, you haven't finished the problem. All right, here's what that looks like on the calculator. If you need to find that, you'll go to the math button right here. All right, and then go over to NUM. All right, I'm going to use my right cursor to get there. And then ABS, where you are right there. ABS stands for absolute value, so I'll hit enter. Then let's try 3. And I can move out of the absolute value bars by using my right and left arrows. Absolute value of 3, how far away from 0 is the number 3? Well, it's 3 units away from 0. Okay, let's do the same thing with -3. So I'll hit math, go over to NUM, ABS, that first thing there is absolute value. This time I'm going to put -3 inside the absolute value bars. And my calculator tells me that -3 is also 3 units away from 0. So that's how you're going to find that on your calculator if you need to use that during class. All right, let's look at solving some equations. So I know that I have this quantity x plus 2. I don't know what it is, but I know that it is 7 units away from 0. Well, that tells me that whatever that is on the inside, maybe it's 7 units away to the left. Maybe it's 7 units away to the right. I don't know. So I have to allow for both possibilities. When I get ready to solve any absolute value equation, you have to have 2 answers because you might be going to the right, you might be going to the left. All right, so let's solve this one. Trying to get x by itself. -7 and -2, that makes -9. All right, and then over here on the right-hand side, looking at the positive one, 7 minus 2 is 5. So if I put -9 in for x, or if I put 5 in for x, I'm going to get a quantity that is 7 units away from 0. It might be 7 units to the left, it might be 7 units to the right. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it's 7 units away. All right, let's do the same thing with this one. So I see my absolute value bars there. I know that I could be taking that quantity 3 units to the left. I could be taking that quantity 3 units to the right. So as before, we are going to allow for both possibilities, and we're going to get 2 solutions. So the one on the left, subtracting 5 from both sides, I get x equals -8. -3 minus 5 is -8. And on the right, subtracting 5 over here, x equals -2. Okay, so this one might be a little bit confusing because you get a negative for both. And remember, I told you that one of them is going to be a positive and one of them is going to be a negative. But the thing that's positive and negative is this at the beginning. It doesn't mean that your answers will be positive and negative. It means that the quantity itself is 3 units to the left or to the right of 0. All right, another thing I want you to notice is that when I got this answer and this answer, it wasn't positive and negative of the same number. You're usually not going to get positive 4 and negative 4 or positive 5 and negative 5. Usually it's going to be two different numbers. So you can't just solve one and then make it negative. That will not give you the right answer. All right, this one's a little bit different. This time I have a 5 outside of my absolute value bars. Well, if I want to know how far away that quantity is from 0, the first thing I have to do is get that by itself. So I'm going to need to get the absolute value alone. I'm going to need to isolate the absolute value before I split it into two problems. So to get rid of that 5, that is 5 times the absolute value of x. Opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5. All right, so when I cancel out the 5s over there, notice that that did not affect the absolute value bars. So I still have absolute value of x equal to 5. I still have absolute value, which means I'm still asking a question. I'm not done until I split it into two pieces. So whatever that quantity is inside the absolute value bars, it might be to the left of 0. It might be to the right of 0. And so I'm going to get two answers. This is a case where you do have positive and negative of the same number. So it's not that it can never happen. It's just that it doesn't normally. So be prepared to get two different answers most of the time, but not necessarily all of the time. All right, how about this one? I have the same sort of situation. I've got that 3 outside the absolute value bar. So what do you guys think I should do? I agree. I think I should divide. The 3's are going to cancel. That doesn't affect anything inside the absolute value bars. It's still the same. 9 divided by 3 is 3 over there on the right-hand side. So my quantity x minus 8, it is either 3 units away from, oops, that's supposed to be an 8, 3 units away from 0 on the left-hand side, or 3 units away from 0 on the right-hand side. Okay, so let's see what we get when we solve this. If I want to get x by itself, I'm going to need to add 8. So negative 3 plus 8 is positive 5. Let's add 8 over here. 3 plus 8 is 11. Okay, so again, notice I did not get a positive and a negative answer. This time I got two positives, and that's okay. The thing that's positive and negative is here. After I get the absolute value by itself, then I want to split it into two different equations, one with a negative going to the left, one with a positive going to the right. Okay, this one is going to start off the same way. I need to get that absolute value quantity by itself. All right, the 4's cancel out when I divide. And 8 divided by 4 is 2. Notice at this point, I still have my absolute value bars. I haven't done anything with those yet. That's the next step. Isolate the absolute value first, get the absolute value by itself, and then split it into two separate equations. One equation going to the left, and one equation going to the right. Okay, so now let's solve each of those separately. So I'm going to solve the negative one over here on the left. Negative 2 plus 5 equals 3, and I'm going to divide by 2. 2 does not go into 3 evenly, so I'm just going to leave my answer as 3/2. You'll have to see what Delta Math requires of you. If you go off to college and use a different product, perhaps a Pearson product, you'll have to see what that system requires of you. Very often it's going to be to leave your answer as a fraction. Because of repeating decimals, which aren't really nice to work with, it's a lot easier just to work with a fraction, to be honest with you. Often they're going to want you to leave your answer as a fraction. Okay, let's do the other one. So I'm going to add 5. So I get 2x equals 7. 2 plus 5 is 7. All right, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And again, 2 does not go into 7 evenly, so I'm going to leave my answer as a fraction. So my two possibilities here for the quantity x are 3/2 and 7/2. All right, now if I wanted to check that, remember how we talked about checking the other ones where we could just substitute it in? You can do the same thing here. And if that works out to be 8, I'll know I got it right. So let me pull my calculator up here. Move it down where we can all see it. Okay, so I'm just going to type this in. 4 times absolute value. Sorry, you guys, I can't see and type at the same time. All right, and then inside of there, I'm going to put 2 parentheses, 3/2. Remember how we talked about always putting your fractions in parentheses, minus 5, and then come out of the absolute value bars, hit enter, and I got 8, which is what I wanted. So I know I got it right. All right, let's try this one. So again, I need to get the absolute value by itself before I start splitting it up into two separate equations. Well, this time I've got two numbers outside of the absolute value. Just like with regular equations, when I just have an x or a y, I'm going to do the adding and subtracting part first. (11 minus 2 is 9. Okay, and now I'm going to divide both sides by 6, working to get the absolute value by itself. Well, 6 does not go into 9 evenly, but it does simplify. 3 will go into both of those. So I'm going to use 3/2. So now I have the absolute value of 1 minus 3x equals 3/2. Okay, let's split that up into our two separate equations. I need to go to the left. I need a negative one. And also I need to go to the right. I need a positive one. All right, so let's solve that. I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. Well, 1 is the same thing as 2 over 2 because you have to have a common denominator, right, in order to subtract and add with fractions. So that is going to end up being negative 5/2. You can put that in your calculator if you need to. Divide both sides by negative 3. Okay, now you guys be careful about how you put this in your calculator. You're going to have to type it in negative 5/2 in parentheses. Oops. Divided by negative 3. So when you type that in, you should get negative 5 over negative 6, which is positive 5/6, right? Because negative divided by negative is a positive. All right, let's do this one. Subtracting 1 from both sides. 3/2 minus 2/2 is 1/2. Divide by negative 3. All right, again, be really careful about how you put that in your calculator. Putting that fraction in parentheses, and you're going to end up with negative 1/6 because a positive divided by a negative is a negative. All right, last one. So on this one, I'm going to start off the same way. I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides. All right, I still don't have the absolute value by itself. Remember that negative out there is the same thing as multiplying by negative 1. So I need to divide by negative 1 on both sides. And now I can split it into two separate equations. I've got negative 14 on the left, positive 14 on the right. I'm going to subtract 2 to solve that. X equals negative 16. And on this side, when I subtract 2, x equals 12. So those are my two possibilities. X equals negative 16 and x equals 12.